Welcome, everybody. The webinar will begin shortly. Sorry. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this virtual convening of the ARCS Northern California Chapter biannual visit. My name is Carol Shimke, and I am the Interim Director of the Foundation Relations Office at UC Santa Cruz. I, along with my colleague, Wolff, who is off camera, have had the pleasure to work closely with the ARCS team to put together today's agenda. If you joined early, you will have seen some of the beautiful images of the campus, a reminder of all that we have to look forward to when we are able. So while we can't host this meeting in person, we are thrilled to have this time with you to share the exciting opportunities of those that is happening at UC Santa Cruz and to celebrate the 2020-2021 cohort of 16 ARCS scholars. UC Santa Cruz has been in partnership with ARCS since 1976, and we are grateful for those many years of support. And in all, the Northern California chapter has helped advance the career potential of more than 350 graduate students. So on behalf of our campus, thank you. Before I introduce the first speaker, I want to remind everyone that we are running this as a webinar and only the panelists, including the scholars, will be seen on camera. If there are questions of the panelists, please use the Q&A function at any time. While we do have a full agenda, we hope to have time to pause for a question or two at the end of each section. If there are questions we cannot get to today, we'll be sure to follow up with responses. The first section of the meeting will feature news from our campus provost and executive vice chancellor, Lori Kletzer, and from Quentin Williams, interim vice provost and dean of graduate studies. Next, the deans of engineering, physical and biological sciences, and social sciences division, as well as Erica Hayden, director of the Masters in Science Communications program, will each present highlights of the extraordinary research happening in their domains. In the second part, Dean Williams will present each of the 16 scholars, and we'll hear in more depth about research from 2 scholars. I'd like now to introduce Lisa Kirkland. Lisa and her ARCS colleague, Adina Jennison, who is off camera, are the co-site leaders for UC Santa Cruz. Lisa has been an ARCS member for the 10 years, primarily involved in university relations and finance. Adina joined a year ago and has jumped in with both feet in the university relations side. Lisa, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, and welcome to our ARCS members. We have been so fortunate to work with the team of Carol and Elmet at UCSC. They put together a really great presentation today. And as Carol said, we'll hear from the administrators and the deans and of course the ARCS scholars. And so while we're sorry that we can't be on the beautiful campus, as our president, Joe Whitehouse, always says, there's a silver lining. We won't get stuck behind a truck on Highway 17. So with that, I would like to introduce our chapter president, Dr. Joe Whitehouse.
There. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for hosting us. This is so great to see you and hear from you. This is a really important visit for us. We want to do 2 things. We want to catch up on what's been happening at UC Santa Cruz at multiple levels, at the full university, at the science and engineering and social science departments that we fund. And we also want to meet some of the 16 ARCS scholars on this campus. We really wish we were able to celebrate them in person, but here we are. Our last visit was in November of 2018, and that's seeming like a very, very long time ago. So lots to catch up on. I want to thank the organizers, Carol. Looking forward to teaming up with you and making this partnership even stronger. It's just been really great to see your thoughtful responses to our questions and requests. So thanks so much. Wolff, you are such a pleasure to work with, and the continuity that you bring to this partnership is really greatly appreciated. Your 3 stories from the scholars and from the alums were received with joy and lots of smiles, and they're going to appear on our website soon. So Lisa and Adina, thank you for being our great liaison with UC Santa Cruz and figuring out how to make this webinar happen. Lots of details. It's like a set for an opera, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the curtain. And I'm going to also just thank Chris Brent and Leslie Van Houten, our co-VPs of University Relations at the chapter. So I know that all of us have busy schedules, but particularly chancellors and deans at universities usually get run ragged with meetings and doing a full day of Zoom meetings. Ooh. So Dr. Kletzler, I am just really honored to have you join us. I want to say particular thanks for your leadership of this campus and your commitment to making it a diverse and inclusive culture. That is something we want to learn more about. I've already thanked you for the crawl lectures. I am a devotee. And Quentin Williams, I remember that you are also an ARCS alum, and I look forward to learning what you're seeing as the challenges to funding young scientists on the graduate program. I also want to congratulate UCSC for getting that statistics program approved as a fundable department. I can't remember his name, but boy, did you hire the right person to advocate for statistics. Our group was nodding up and down, and you know, everybody went great. We have a PhD epidemiologist who works at Genentech and is a member, and she went, this was the finest explanation of why statistics is needed and why we should be funding it I've ever heard. So you have that compliment from Dr. Engman. So I also want to say thanks to the deans and the director. We certainly look forward to you, and thanks to all of the ARCS members who are joining us. If you weren't curious about science and committed to funding young scientists, we wouldn't be here. So that's really important. But now my favorite part. Thank you, ARCS scholars. We really do wish we were celebrating you in person, and we want to just tell you that it is your commitment and perseverance and resilience, particularly in these tumultuous times, that gives us so much hope. You being a grad student has got to be challenging in normal times, and these are not normal. So we get that you have risen to this occasion. We hope that the ARCS Award makes a difference and that you remain in this community of excellence. One of the things I encourage you to do is join the national LinkedIn of ARCS scholars and members. There are about 1,000 of us nationwide, and it could be an important network for you. So again, you are the reason we exist. You inspire us. You make us proud. You give us hope. And we love being part of your team. So hopefully you've received these ARCS medallions and your certificates. We were trying to give you some tangible evidence that you have a peanut gallery out here of supporters. So I hope you've all received that. Past scholars have taught us that you will go on to make increasingly complex, to help solve increasingly complex problems that face our world through interdisciplinary collaborations, making life-changing discoveries, starting new companies, and importantly, training the next generation of scientists. We are really, really happy to be on your team, meet you today, and look forward to hearing from you. I was going to have everybody go off mute to give you a round of applause, but I'm just going to say, please take my applause as symbolic of the whole group. And I'm going to pass the microphone to Dr. Kletzler.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehouse. Thank you for your thanks to us. Thank you for your enthusiasm for this visit. Thank you for sharing some of the things that I would have shared, because I have a long list of things that I was going to share, and you provide me an opportunity to get further down that list. And so the first thanks really goes to the foundation. Thank you, ARCS Foundation. You have been our partners since 1976. And we couldn't do what we are committed to doing with our graduate students if we didn't have your partnership. That partnership is effective, it is deep, it is meaningful. And I can put it also in dollar terms that since 1976, started in the 76-77 academic year, ARCS has awarded approximately $2.7 million to UCSC. This is a deep and meaningful partnership. And I am so delighted to be back with all of you and to be part of it. This is an important relationship for us as a campus. It's an important relationship for us as teachers and researchers, and most importantly to our students. And personally, I was part of the November 2018 visit. And so I am, as I said earlier this morning, I got hooked at that 2018 visit. So I'm really delighted to be back, even in a Zoom environment. My second and perhaps more joyful opening is that I want to celebrate and acknowledge our 2021 scholars. You are our largest group ever at 16. You are extremely impressive. I will admit, sometimes these moments where we get to celebrate you honestly kind of bring tears to my eyes, because you represent everything that we are devoted to here as a public research university. So it's a celebration of all of you. It is a deep, deep, deep congratulations from me. And we celebrate you in that legacy, from that legacy perspective. We really celebrate you as our next generation of scientists, as practitioners, as activists, and your really groundbreaking research and scholarship in science, in engineering, speaking now as a social scientist, and also in science communication, right? The longer that list is of the areas that you fall into really indicates the depth of what we do here at Santa Cruz and the depth of the support that we get from the ARCS Foundation. And yes, thank you, Dr. Whitehouse, for mentioning statistics. It's a very exciting development for us. It probably goes without saying, but it shouldn't go without saying, that this past year has been tumultuous and will continue to be tumultuous in some of the same ways as the past months and in some different ways as we look to spring and summer. But here we are, right? Here we are in this site visit, right? Addressing those challenges, showing our resilience, and affording us this opportunity to celebrate kind of where we've come from and where we're headed. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of aspects at the kind of highest campus level. As one who loves to be in the details, I get to leave that to my dean colleagues and as we proceed through the morning. But I do want to hit a couple of highlights at the highest level that are really relevant to this visit. And the first is, since you were last here, we have been elected to the AAU, the American Association, the Association of American Universities. There I go, getting the A's reversed. And you know that the AAU has 65 members, 6 other UCs. There are many things I could say about the AAU. You know, it is limited to institutions who are at the absolute forefront of high impact research and educational excellence. These are the public flagship universities and the private universities. But what I do want to say is, along with UC Irvine, UC Santa Cruz is the youngest university to ever gain admission to the AAU. You know, we are a relative youngster at 55, right? We are with institutions who are 100 years old and many times often more. We are also one of 4 Hispanic serving institutions. So this combination here is public research university in the AAU and Hispanic serving institution. We are one of only 4 HSIs in the AAU, and our companions are UC sisters, right? So the University of California has this space in the AAU, one that is dedicated to be a Hispanic serving institution. I'm going to come back to that. We also were invited to join, and we took up the invitation. We were invited to join the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, which had a brief opening and then I think closed. So we took that invitation. It was a fabulous opportunity to widen our set of institutional partnerships and teaching and research relationships in a really critically important part of the world. And here's my favorite part, which I'm going to link back to AAU, because this part is deeply meaningful to me and to many of us on campus, is we landed yet again in the US News and World Report top 5 universities for student social mobility. We attract, we retain, we graduate students who advance up the income ladder, right? When you compare it to where earlier generations of their families have been. That's the measure. That's how, in a very high level. That's what we're talking about when we talk about social mobility. And this pairing of AAU and top 5, in the top 5 universities for social mobility, that's the pairing of high impact research and training with equity results that illustrate the commitment and distinction of the University of California, Santa Cruz, right? That is who we are, but who we have to every day intentionally continue to aspire to be, that combination of training the next generation of researchers, of knowledge producers, of activists and practitioners, while we're doing that cutting edge research that makes a difference in some of the world's most challenging problems. And we are doing it by widening, expanding, and continuing to pursue excellence that comes from really living up to this adage, which can sound like a cliche, but it's really true. The talent is everywhere and opportunity is not, right? And so we pursue our excellence. We are pursuing excellence and diversity because they are inextricably linked with each other. And that, much of that, but not all of it, much of that is really illustrated as being a Hispanic serving institution. So I wanted to say a couple additional points about us as an HSI. What I want to say about us being an HSI is really honestly bragging, in that sense of, since 2015, we have earned several multi-million-dollar Department of Education Hispanic serving grants. And what these grants all do, with slightly different variations, but what these grants all do is allow us to better serve our Latinx and low-income students, right? To begin to really continue to help us improve our academic and career outcomes for Latinx and low-income students, and to continue to advance them towards their career development, including graduate school opportunities. That's what these grants do. And in September, we landed a new $3 million grant. In fact, we earned 2 $3 million grants, all for Hispanic serving institutions, all from the Department of Education, that are very much oriented for that step of career preparation and going on to graduate school. I'd like, in my tiny little bit of remaining time, to pick up one of the chancellor's priorities. And I'm not trying to do justice to all the chancellor's priorities. I'm now cherry picking one of the chancellor's priorities, honestly, right? And the one I want to cherry pick is advancing UCSC's research profile, because that's very consistent with what I've shared with you this morning about being elected to the AAU, about joining the APRU, and along with being elected to the AAU, we're really on. So that election really identifies us as a high impact research university, but that's not the only evidence that we're a high impact research university. Our research profile, and if you will, our research profile trajectory is really advancing. Grants and contracts were up 16% over last year, and our grants and contracts are up 54% over the past 3 years. That is really an amazing outcome. And it's a real tribute to our faculty and researchers, right? That's where the ideas come from. And when the grants come in, that's the confirmation of the promise and potential of those ideas. And those dollars mean very much to us, but so does the indication, right, that the outcome, the research results and the promise and potential of those ideas really gets verified. And we are continuing, our plans continue to support research and creative scholarship collaboration. More to the point of this morning, and this is where I really want, this is where I will end, is we want to grow and diversify our graduate student program. Graduate students are crucial to our research success. And they're crucial to the legacy of what UCSC can contribute to solving some of the world's greatest challenges. Our students are our legacy. We couldn't do what we do without partnerships like the ARCS Foundation. We know, however, that the challenges of continuing to attract and retain and support graduate students are really considerable. And I wouldn't be doing justice to advancing our research profile and talking about graduate students if I didn't point out in every time I talk about it, that requires us to be dedicated to affordable housing, to an inclusive climate, to competitive financial packages, which, thank you, ARCS, you help us reach, and to increase grant funding and other philanthropic support. We also need to grow and diversify our faculty, because our faculty are our research and professional and career development mentors. The last bit of good news that I'll share before I turn this over is we just received 3 grants totaling nearly $900,000 from Genentech and the Genentech Foundation to support underrepresented students in STEM fields. So right at the heart of what motivates you, the ARCS Foundation, and your support for us. And what this Genentech Foundation funding will do is help us continue to grow what has been a successful proof of concept for us. We have a program called the Academic Excellence Program, ACE. And for decades, it's helped students succeed in their classes and graduate with degrees in STEM, right? The really first step to moving on as graduate students. And this is going to allow ACE to expand its services. We couldn't be happier. And with a particular eye toward how is it we can continue to address equity gaps, right? Equity gaps that exist for our underrepresented and historically excluded students from those populations, particularly in the time of a pandemic where those equity gaps have in fact worsened. So student success is in the middle of our sights, and our partnership with ARCS is a really important part of our dedication to student success. So I look forward to the rest of the morning. Thank you again for this opportunity to celebrate with you. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Quentin Williams, who is Interim Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Studies and a Professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences. Quentin, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Lori. At the start of this, I'd just like to thank Joe and the ARCS team for running this site visit. We're extremely appreciative for all you've done over time for the graduate enterprise for STEM within the greater Bay Area. And as Joe alluded to, I actually have a personal connection to ARCS because horrifyingly enough, 33 years ago, a third of a century, so I'm not as old as Sputnik, but it was a little while ago, I was actually an ARCS scholar at UC Berkeley. And I remember how much that, that additional infusion of funds mattered at the time to me. So we very much appreciate, and the time frame of that really illustrates what an excellent partner ARCS has been over time to Bay Area universities, and especially the Northern California chapter. So what I'll do today is basically give a quick overview of graduate education. I don't have too much time, and I know you'd rather hear from the scholars than from me. So what I'd like to do is a few winter 2021 updates about graduate education, because it's been an extraordinarily challenging year. What I'll say about that from the perspective of the Division of Graduate Studies is that obviously the whole COVID thing, it's difficult to disaggregate this year from COVID. And even though it has made field work, lab work, archival work of all sorts more difficult for students. There's been a huge amount of creative work that's been done to work around the COVID remote aspects. And in particular, support like ARCS gives to the graduate enterprise has been critically important during this bridging period of trying to work through some fairly inconvenient circumstances. So what I'll do is also take a brief look at our trends in doctoral enrollment and give a little bit of perspective on the graduate STEM education as we move forward. So in terms of our doctoral enrollments with time, and your support for doctoral enrollments is absolutely critical for our ongoing financial packages and funding our best students on the campus. You can see this general trend here that between 2015 to the present. I haven't put the current year, partially because I have an excuse, which is that there is that these are 3/4 averages of enrollment, and we don't have the 3/4 average for this year. But also we'd see a little bit of a dip this year. And that's principally because we basically lost our first year international class because between a combination of consulates being closed and travel restrictions, basically our entire international contingent by and large deferred for a year. So there would be a drop if I were to plot this for 2020 to 2021, or sorry. And what you can see from this is that the investment in our campus over time in greater numbers of faculty positions within the Baskin School of Engineering, which is the second highest line here, and the Physical and Biological Sciences Division have kind of parlayed into an increased enrollment through time in the STEM fields at UCSC. And this has also been coupled with sort of maturation of faculty research efforts. And see that we've basically moved the STEM effort at UCSC substantially forward. As Lori alluded to, our funding for STEM has also gone up quite dramatically. But the ARCS portion of that, being graduate student focused, is absolutely pivotal to us moving forward. If we look at our doctoral programs, this is sort of a spaghetti plot of all the ARCS eligible programs, except for stats, which I didn't include because I wasn't sure they were going to be eligible for this. And you can see that because of a Baskin School of Engineering reorganization, we have a mega department, which is our computer science and engineering at the top here. And it basically reflects our general trend of increasing enrollments over time. I think the lowest yellow here, which is computational media, and you'll hear from one of the students in computational media in a little bit, is particularly notable. We started up a new program in 2016 and 17. And we've progressively ramped up. And actually this year it has over 40 doctoral students in it. So it's really been a fabulous success and very popular. In terms of our graduate principal goals and focus as we move forward, a lot of institutions talk about interdisciplinarity, but I think at UC Santa Cruz, we really take a much more holistic and personalized view of interdisciplinarity because so much of what we do involves collaborators in other disciplines, and it has been a theme of this campus for decades. And we view that sort of perspective as being the critical to tackling the 21st century problems that are emerging. We have growth areas which, and this is not a comprehensive list, but in particular biomedical science and engineering, dovetailing off our major genomics efforts. Data science is an area that has proliferated across the campus. Our environmental and climate science is absolutely first rate. And we have emerging areas in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And one of the things that we've done at Santa Cruz over time, and again, it's a long history that dates back to the design of things like the Mauna Kea telescopes at UC Santa Cruz, is that we've developed and deployed new technologies to help science and help the science enterprise move forward. And those have varied from the biosciences with looking at basically making viral diagnoses on a chip, drop a piece of blood on a chip, and hopefully you get a diagnosis back of what viruses might be present, on over to state-of-the-art telescopes. The other aspect that we try and emphasize is to train science who can really work in teams and work with folks from diverse backgrounds. And a lot of what is done at Santa Cruz is team science. And we emphasize both the specialization, which is critically important for students, but also the broader skills. And we do try and make sure that folks are not only good researchers, but also excellent teachers, because our students do spend a lot of time in the classroom with our undergraduates and master's students. And management skills are critical in that as well. And we try and emphasize those over time. So we try to be as attentive as possible, and it is a little bit more challenging this year with COVID to have a lot of co-curricular activities and co-curricular resources for graduate students. We try and make sure that our students are not solely academically oriented. We do keep in mind that we are the University of California campus nearest to Silicon Valley, and that there are a plethora of job opportunities that can be accessed in the high-tech industries. We've had challenges this year, perhaps more severe than in the past, because federal dollars have been a little bit more unpredictable in the COVID era. And we have definitely worked towards trying to bridge across that and try and minimize the impacts of COVID delays in financial support. And we also, as Lori discussed, really emphasize diversity and equity and inclusion. I'll give you one statistic, which I have to confess I am not entirely sure of the origin of, but it is perhaps the silver lining in the COVID cloud, which is that for this year, our underrepresented student applications for graduate school are up by 20%. I'm not sure I fully understand all the processes that go into a COVID world producing that, but I think it is a statement that we are doing much better in terms of outreach prospectively in this two-dimensional world, and that we have a lot of appeal for students of diversity. And of course, we are working through the complications of the COVID and post-COVID world. And within that context, ARCS is a critical part of recognizing our highest achieving graduate scientists. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Baskin School of Engineering Dean Alex Wolff, who came to us roughly 5 years ago from University College London. And I'll turn it over to him to discuss the School of Engineering.
Thank you, Quentin. Oops, thank you. I have to say it was actually Imperial College London.
Sorry.
Yes, people use those two. I completely understand that. I see that we're actually a bit behind, and we certainly want to make sure that we hear from our ARC scholars, and that's really the most important thing to do today. So I will really go quickly. Baskin School of Engineering is approaching its 25th anniversary in 2022. So we're maturing, and we are excelling, and I couldn't be prouder of the faculty and students and what they, not just their resilience through this period, but the tremendous progress that they've all been making over the years to elevate the level of research, the quality of teaching, and the impact on our local community and on the world. So I'm really pleased with that. Next slide, please. The Baskin School of Engineering is a rather different engineering school, which was one of the reasons I was actually attracted to it to come here from London. And this is just sort of a map of where we have been putting emphasis over the last 25 years. And you'll notice that the major themes of the school, the major strengths that we build around are rather non-traditional. They are. You won't see a civil engineering department. You won't see a chemical engineering department. You won't see some of those traditional 19th century disciplines. What you see are more 21st century disciplines, and that's what we have organized ourselves around. So these pillars are in engineering mathematics, materials, devices, and instruments, which I kind of view as a pipeline of development from the basic sort of building blocks of materials that come together into devices that are collected together into instruments that can detect and be used to measure various phenomena, from microscopes to photonic measurements of the brain. Computing, of course, is a very, very significant part of what we do, just as it is a very significant and fundamental part of our 21st century society. And we have a lot of expertise in that area, and that actually pervades a lot of what we do in the school. And then health engineering, which is a major, major focus of application areas that we look at in the school across just about all our departments. Just about all of them are contributing in some way to better understanding and better treating disease and sickness and illness, improving lives of people. And in fact, one of the ARCS talks you'll hear today is about a project that is helping people with certain physical disabilities to be able to improve their movement. Next slide, please. So let's you can just go right through there. We have 6 departments. So these are kind of orthogonal to those pillars of strength, and our departments are really more administrative than they are in some sense intellectual, all of them contributing to these pillars of strength. I'll just mention that statistics there, we're unique in the fact that we have a statistics department in an engineering school. And I very much appreciate the fact that ARCS has added statistics as one of our departments. The department chair is Robert Lund, who we attracted to the school because of the potential of statistics as something in engineering. And we're very, very pleased with how that department is developing. We have a moderate-sized faculty, I would say, for an engineering school in the UC system. It's actually on the low end for count of faculty, but we are growing, and we're growing in an attempt to meet the growing popularity of the discipline at UC Santa Cruz. So right now we have about 1/3 of the graduate students and 1/4 of the undergraduate students who are majoring in engineering. Just point out that when I say grad students here, I'm also including master's students, of course. And for a professional school like engineering, master's education is an important part of it. We contributed to the record increase in funding extramural funding that CPVC Klesser mentioned. So in 2019-20, we went up 35.5% year over year in new awards. And just one more click on this slide. In the first 6 months of this academic year, we have already reached 75% of the record total from last year. So we're on a pace to even exceed our record from last year quite substantially. And what that does, of course, is give us the opportunity to fund more work and to help our PhD students focus on their research. Next slide, please. So it's just a sampling of some of the grants. I'm not going to take the time to go through them. I'm just putting them up here as a way to show some of the breadth of areas that our faculty have recently been working in. So things like understanding the human cognition by studying Neanderthal DNA and brains. We have a recent but very, very impactful project in genomics, the telomere to telomere assembly project. This is notable because it is working towards a complete assembly of a human or of a complete human genome, which is actually something that right now does not exist. There are a lot of areas of the genome which are still a mystery, and this is a project to make a complete map of the genome. The person who's leading this is a research scientist, Karen Miga, who was just listed in Nature magazine, in Nature, as one of 5 scientists to watch in 2021. So we're extremely privileged to be able to have Karen Miga here with us working in this project. Okay, I'll just also mention the bioelectronic intelligent control of wound regeneration project. This is actually supported by DARPA. It involves faculty from electrical and computer engineering, as well as applied mathematics. And what they're doing is creating a kind of a bandage, if you will, that helps treat wounds and uses machine learning and control theory to control the application of certain chemicals to promote the healing of the wound. And it's an incredibly exciting project. Okay, next slide. Our faculty are widely recognized by various societies. We have a very, very successful and nationally and internationally recognized group of faculty, and that's reflected in our fellows and academy members. Next slide. That is that ends my presentation. I just want to say thank you. I want to thank our spectacular ACE scholars. We're always really, really proud of the work that they do. It's very, very competitive within engineering. You can see there are 4. We have quite a number of PhD students. Only 4 have been awarded the ACE scholarship, and they are very, very special people. And I'm so proud of the work that they do. And I want to thank ACE again for your support of their work. So thank you. So I will now turn it over to Dean Paul Koch. Paul is the Dean of Physical and Biological Sciences Division and a very valued colleague.
Great, thanks so much, Alex. Thanks to the ARCS Foundation members who are visiting. I really appreciate the support over the years. And I want to congratulate the scholars that are here with us today. I am going to talk about the physical and biological sciences. So if we could go to the next slide. Yeah, by the numbers, there are 9 academic departments and 2 specialized master's programs you're going to hear about, 3 large research institutes and many smaller research centers, about 180 professors, a large number of undergrad majors, and our graduate focus is more on the PhD side. So 500 PhD students, about 70 master's students. You know, near a quarter of the undergrad degrees offered by Santa Cruz are in this division, and you know, almost 40% of the PhD degrees. And we've, I would say, over the last 2 years have stabilized our research support at about 82 million in extramural research funds and nearly 19 million in philanthropic support. Next slide, please. Our academic programs come in 3 broad flavors. There are physical science departments, astronomy, well, they're departments that do physical sciences, I should say. So astronomy, chemistry, earth and planetary sciences, my home department, mathematics and physics. And the image you're seeing below that is the distribution of electrons around a carbon atom in a layer of graphene created by Jairo Velasco in our physics department. We have departments that do biomedical sciences. Chemistry is one of those. It does both physical and biomedical sciences. MCD biology and microbiology and environmental toxicology. I'm going to call that METOX from here on out. The image above biomedical is from the work of chemist Carrie Parch, who studies the molecules that control the clocks in your bodies. And she's recently discovered that a single mutation will cause a misfunction in that molecule that will turn you into a night owl, someone who will be up late in the evening. Finally, on the environmental sciences, earth and planetary sciences department, ecology and evolutionary biology, METOX, and ocean sciences. And down below, there's an image of Slavik Tolacic on the right, and Grant Edwards, one of our scholars this year, who work, among other things, on the stability of the East Antarctic ice sheet, and along with Earth scientist Terry Blackburn, have given us some disturbing news that this giant East Antarctic ice sheet may be less stable than we could have hoped for. Next slide, please. I also mentioned the 2 master's programs. You're going to hear about science communication from Erica Hayden, so I won't focus there. Coastal Science and Policy is a new master's program. Only its 3rd class has been entered this fall. And it's focused on, fusing science and policy to solve real problems in related to the coastal zone. And there's a focus in both of these programs on bringing in a diverse group of master's students. And I think Erica will talk about that. Next slide, please. Since you last visited, we've had a number of faculty honors. 3 new members of the National Academy of Sciences: Susan Strom, a molecular biologist; Michael Dine, who works on string theory in the physics department; and in my department, Frances Nimmo, a planetary scientist. 2 new members of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences: Natalie Batalla, an ARCS scholar here at Santa Cruz, and now a faculty member; and Enrico Ramirez Ruiz in the astronomy department. And Carol Greiter joined our faculty in MCD biology. Carol has many accolades. She's a Nobel Prize winner, and she was elected to the National Academy of Inventors this year. And we're really pleased to have Carol join our faculty. Carol's one of 22 women who've ever won a Nobel Prize in science. Next slide. New initiatives, 2 big ones for the science division, although we have partners in this effort. Global and Community Health was a partnership that began with the Social Sciences Division. We did 8 hires in this area last year, 8 new faculty members in this area last year that spanned from virology to food safety, and we landed a big grant in this area. John McMillan in the chemistry department, along with other faculty, are studying basically the active ingredients in botanical dietary supplements. A $5 million center grant for $5 million grant for that purpose. And Natalie, who arrived on campus around the time of your last visit, has helped launch the Astrobiology Initiative, and in that short amount of time has herself landed a $5 million center grant to look for signatures of life in our galaxy. Next slide, please. I want to end by talking about some impactful scholars that we have, past scholars from Santa Cruz ARCS, and some accomplishments this year. Barbara Beacons, an ARCS scholar in 1990-91 and a graduate of Earth and Planetary Sciences, currently a research hydrologist at the U.S. Geological Survey. She was named a fellow of the National Academy of Engineering this year for her work on water systems. And Sikan Akpan, a SciComm graduate and an ARCS scholar in 2013-14, had a whole host of accomplishments over the last couple of years. While working at PBS NewsHour in 2019, he received a Peabody Award for a special on plastic pollution. He was part of a team in 2020 that got an Emmy Award for a special called Stopping a Killer Pandemic. This came out in 2019, so sort of prescient. And in 2021, he joined, he's now the health and science editor for WNYC, the large public radio station in New York City. I'm just gonna end with a serendipitous moment. I was watching a clip from the Daily Show with Trevor Noah this morning while eating my granola, and an ARCS scholar popped up, Mike Wara, who received a PhD in the Ocean Sciences Department here and was an ARCS scholar. I didn't dig up the year of his ARCS scholarship. Mike is a lawyer and professor at Stanford University, and really a leading voice on energy policy. And he was talking about the current crisis in Texas and the source of it, and that the source of it is a failure of our natural gas systems. So I will stop there and pass the mic to Catherine Mitchell, our Dean of the Social Sciences, who joined us several years ago from the University of Washington. And like Alex, is a great partner for the Division of Physical and Biological Sciences.
Thanks so much, Paul. It was 4 years ago. It alternately seems like a minute ago and 100 years. So really love being here. And I want to say thank you so much for letting me tell you about the Division of the Social Sciences. I really appreciate the fact that the ARCS added the environmental studies to your programming a couple years ago. So next, please. So we have 8 departments in the social sciences, and 2 have a mix of natural and social sciences, and that's anthropology and environmental studies. Overall, we graduate about 40% of all undergraduates on campus and about just over a quarter of graduate students. We have a strong focus on experiential learning, on field-based inquiry, on community-engaged research, and we work on the pressing social, political, and environmental questions of the day. So next, please. So the Executive Vice Chancellor, Lori Kletzer, she spoke this morning about our campus's commitment to diversity and equity at the beginning of the presentation. And I wanted to quickly highlight some student demographics for our division. So these numbers indicate our really strong focus and commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the social sciences. I think you can see that in every area, including gender diversity, underrepresented minorities, and first generation status, we are higher than the campus average for both undergraduates and graduate students. And last year, of the 13 faculty we hired, 9 were faculty of color or women who are underrepresented in their fields. So we strongly believe that greater diversity and greater research excellence are inextricably linked. So thanks. Next slide, please. In the Environmental Studies Department, which the Foundation has generously included in recent years, our faculty are engaged in a number of critical research endeavors. And I'm just going to give you 3 examples here. So on the left, you can see that's Anne Kapocinski, who, with her co-researcher, Paleb Sarkar, she's developed a cost-effective new aquaculture feed. And it's one that eliminates conventional fish meal and fish oil ingredients. So Anne is also the chairperson of the Union of Concerned Scientists in the country. This fish feed is it's a fish-free feed. Try saying that fast 3 times. It's such a potential game changer in the area of sustainable aquaculture that the team has actually been contacted by the media and by companies all over the world since their scientific reports came out this November. And it's fun to have it on our 30-acre farm here. As you probably know, it's one of the oldest sustainable organic farms in the country that has trained some of our apprentice people in sustainable agroecology techniques for 50 years, the oldest training program in the country. The fish barns are actually on the farm, and so the wastewater from the experiments can serve as fertilizer on the farm. And that's the kind of really cool synergy that I love to see in our division. Second, in the middle there, you can see Karen Hall. Her restoration ecology lab focuses on understanding factors limiting recovery of ecosystems from human disturbance. And what's really neat about her project and her lab work is that, and it involves both undergrads and grads, is that it focuses on using the research to help folks design the best restoration strategies around the world. So her team works with landowners and with conservation organizations in California and Latin America with the idea that they can apply their results to help find the best solutions for land management and policy decisions. And then on the right, you can see one of our junior faculty whose work is also cutting edge. That's Dr. Milo Montenegro, and she just joined us last year from a presidential postdoc at Berkeley. She works on projects that span the development of new biotechnologies such as CRISPR, the emergence of grassroots movements in connection with scientist research partnerships, and the politics of knowledge and the advancement of agroecology, food, and seed sovereignty. So next, please. In terms of our broader interdisciplinary initiatives, along with global community health that Dean Koch spoke about, we're also doing another project with them. He also introduced the Coastal Science and Policy Masters, and it's really taken off in the last couple of years. I'm really excited about this program. It's a 2-year Master of Science and PhD designated emphasis. And the mission is, again, it's combining science and policy, where the idea is to educate the emerging coastal science and policy leaders from around the world. And what differentiates this program from others that are similar to it is that they're pairing science and policy from the very beginning, and they're working with vulnerable communities as partners also from the very beginning. Coastal problems, as we all know, they're incredibly complex, and they involve both natural and social threats to ecological systems. So our responses have to be complex as well. And they have to involve interdisciplinary solutions and community collaborations. So I would say this is team science at its very best. And this is an image of the 2018, 19, and 1920 cohorts. And I think you can see, so students are from 10 different countries, all impacted by coastal problems associated with climate change. And I think you can just look at this, this image and see the diversity of the participants in the program, which is another distinguishing feature of this program. Next, please. So I'm just going to end by giving you some information on our two ARCS scholars, and this is written by their PhD supervisors. So Anna Nisi is on the left. She's a PhD candidate in the Environmental Studies Department at UC Santa Cruz, and Anna studies the puma population in Santa Cruz Mountains. She focuses on how habitat fragmentation impacts puma movement, ecology, and population dynamics. And through her research, Anna hopes to inform and improve large carnivore conservation in human-dominated landscapes. Anna has won several competitive fellowships to support her work, including from the National Science Foundation and Phi Beta Kappa, and she's involved in local conservation and education outreach programs as well. This supports her in doing her field work, which involves collaring. I think you can see her working there with a little kitten and monitoring adult pumas as well as any litters of kittens that may be born. And she conducts analyses, has been writing her dissertation, and she has submitted chapters for publication in peer-reviewed journals. She is incredibly grateful to ARCS for their support. And then on the right, I think you can see Josie Lessage. She analyzed how the vegetation community has changed over the past couple of decades in 8 California grasslands. Her work has revealed evidence of increased dominance by species adapted to warmer climates over time. And these results support the idea that climate change is already impacting California's flora, benefiting species adapted to warmer and drier conditions. Without the ARCS fellowship, she would not have been able to complete her dissertation by October 2020, or eventually have been hired to her current position as an applied ecologist at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. She's honored to have been awarded the 2019-2020 ARCS Fellowship as the Dolores McMullen Scholar, is deeply thankful for the support provided by the ARCS Foundation. So I just want to end by saying a huge thank you to the ARCS Foundation. Your support is always important, but it's especially meaningful now in these difficult times for research and education. So thanks so much. And I'm going to now turn it over to Erica Check-Hayden, who is the Director of Science Communication. Erica?
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Well, I am especially honored to be able to talk with you today because our program has a special relationship with ARCS. We have 2 ARCS scholars among our class of 10, and it has been that way for a few years. So we really benefit from your support, and especially your continuous support. It's been, especially during these COVID times, so meaningful to know that we can count on you when other sources of funding are, changing plans or doing things, or, not especially reliable at this time. So we're really very grateful. I also remember meeting with you all in person in 2018 when you came to Santa Cruz for the site visit. So it's lovely to be seeing you again. Next slide, please. So our program is very unique. We offer a 1-year master's degree, and our program is specifically designed for scientists and people with science training to give them a 1-year boot camp in communication training. So this is for scientists who want to go on and become communicators and journalists. They want to use their training in that way. And we have a unique model in that we combine equal amounts of classwork and professional internships. So all of the students go through the program doing classwork alongside professional part-time internships with communications institutions, universities, and media organizations. And our model is very successful. We have more than 350 alums at this point, and they reach a collective audience of millions of people. So they are making a huge impact in the world, talking about science in a way that is accurate and meaningful. And of course, we're seeing the need for that, especially in these times. Our alums work at institutions and outlets including the New York Times, NPR, NASA, universities such as our own University of California, and they've collectively won more than 75 awards, including prestigious awards in our field and awards such as Dean Koch talked about, the Emmy and the Peabody, and including being listed as Pulitzer finalists. So I wanted to share a couple examples of impact that your ARC scholars have made right now, today, in these times. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic story is probably one of the biggest science stories of our lifetimes, and our alums have done a fantastic public service by covering the pandemic in the real world for that audience of millions. So two examples of this I wanted to highlight were one, Sikhan Akpan, as Paul talked about. Sikhan was an ARC scholar, and before he took his current position at WNYC, he was working at National Geographic last year, where he did a lot of outreach events, not only through his work at Nat Geo, but also directly interfacing with the public. So this screenshot of him is he's doing a Reddit AMA on the COVID science and COVID precautions. And one of the things that he talked about in that AMA, probably the most important thing he talked about, was the need to make decisions based on scientific data, scientific evidence, and not what somebody might be sharing on Facebook. This example on my right is Erin Garcia de Jesus, who was the ARC scholar who presented when you did your site visit here in 2018. So she graduated in our class of 2019, and her PhD training is in virology. So she graduated and hit the real world just as this pandemic was starting to unfold, and her training has made her incredibly useful as a communicator about this pandemic. So she was hired immediately by Science News, and she has been producing really informative and accurate communication about the COVID pandemic for all of this time. I understand that one of our ARC scholars from last year, Amanda Height, from the class of 2020, is also working with the ARCS Foundation now, perhaps on writing some scholar profiles for your website. Next slide, please. So I think what we're really seeing is the COVID-19 pandemic has just underscored the need for not only accurate and reliable and science-based science communication, but also the importance of diversity in the way that we communicate about science. So we need to reach all kinds of audiences, local, regional, national, international, and the communicators have to have credibility in the communities that are most affected. So I wanted to give a couple examples of how our program has pivoted to meet this need. So as I mentioned, we have partnerships with professional media organizations that the students undertake during the year. And that allowed us to perform a public service in the spring of 2020 when the pandemic first hit in our area, because we have a longstanding partnership with the San Jose Mercury News. We actually transitioned one of our spring classes to directly support the science coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic that the Mercury News was doing in the spring, just as the pandemic emerged. So this is the Bay Area's largest regional newspaper, reaching an audience all throughout the Bay Area, but they only have one or two dedicated full-time science reporters. It was really too much for just two reporters to take on by themselves. So our students worked with the Merc and published 13 news stories in the Merc about COVID treatments, epidemiology, vaccines, with the Merc over just 10 weeks of that class. And more broadly, our students published 24 articles through the Merc and through their own internships about COVID-19 pandemic in the spring of 2020. So that's an example of how even in the program, we are able to make a strong public service impact thanks to your funding and to our model. Next slide, please. As far as where the program is going, we have a very strong focus on diversity. So that's something I've been really adamant about since I came in, and you can see that in several ways through our program content and our classes who we admit. It's part of our classes every year are more diverse than the field of science journalism as a whole, and I feel very strongly about that. We also incorporate diversity into our curriculum and our training. So for instance, this piece that's on the screen is an example of one initiative that I started last year, which is an international reporting fellowship for a current student, in which they partner with an editor journalist in another country outside the United States to cover local science that's being done by local researchers. And by partnering with a local editor, we're also supporting the journalism community overseas. So this story was reported by Ashley Papp from last year's class, and she traveled to Costa Rica to write about a coral reef restoration project ongoing there. She worked with a Costa Rican editor on the story, and she also produced multimedia, including video and a podcast from there. And I was really excited that we also had some funding to translate this piece into Spanish as well, which is the first time we've ever been able to to translate one of our capstone project features into Spanish. It was also greatly helped by the fact that Ashley herself is a Spanish speaker. So by incorporating more diversity into our classes, we're able to do work that speaks to much broader audiences. I'm probably over my time, so I will wrap up and say that, you know, where we're going is continuing to do a lot of projects to incorporate more diversity into our program and the field as a whole, and that we are, you know, committed to doing this even as the COVID-19 pandemic creates special difficulties for the groups that we are trying to specifically recruit. And I will stop there and thank you for your attention.
Okay, thanks, Erica. It's my pleasure at this juncture to introduce this year's UCSC ARCS Scholars. And I will give just a brief statement about each one of them. And I will be describing some fairly complicated research in very short order, so I hope I don't get anything horribly wrong in this, but I don't think I will. Okay, so our 16 scholars are across the board absolutely superb, and I'll go through their things one by one. You'll hear more from David in a few minutes. He's from astronomy and astrophysics, and he has been working on looking at optical signatures of gravitational wave anomalies. And that's been very high profile work, and you'll hear more from him in a few minutes. You'll also hear more from Aviv Alor, who is in Until Statistics, our newest ARCS program, Computational Media. And he basically uses game-like experiences to improve improve physical rehabilitation. Again, you'll hear more from him. Near and dear to my heart is the work of Graham Edwards, because he's in my home department. And he's worked heavily on several things, which include looking at the geochemistry of meteorites, as well as looking at how ice sheets may retreat or advance with time. Hope Yanuri has focused on the carbon cycle, and in particular, most of us know that the oceans take up a lot of oxidized carbon, but they also take up a lot of organic carbon as well. And she focuses on the organic carbon budget of the oceans. Isabella Bachmann is one of our science journalism honorees, and she is currently at the Stanford University News Service and has worked heavily with NASA Ames Research Center over time. Has written a lot of science in various outlets during her career in the science communication program. Lena Bachmann, in a theme of at least one other honoree, looks at a cause of intestinal disorders, major intestinal and sometimes fatal intestinal disorders, human astrovirus, and in particular, figuring out how you target it better with chemical interference that might lead to vaccines. Maggie Thompson is from our astronomy and astrophysics department, and she is looking at basically how what meteorites can tell us in terms of how the gases that they release about the formation of atmospheres of terrestrial planets and other planets throughout the galaxy. Oscar Cazares is interested in looking at how milk is actually generated by mammals and humans in particular, and in particular how humans manage to reactivate their milk production and regulate their milk production during pregnancy and post-pregnancy as well. Megan Sabal is interested in how prey are affected by predators and how that impacts their populations. And she looks heavily at juvenile salmon and does extensive modeling work on those as well. Pavlo Vlastos works on something called ASVs, autonomous surface vehicles, which in his particular example is the UAV equivalent of boats, I believe. Remote operated boats that can be deployed to study things like algal blooms that have impacted the fisheries along the West Coast here much more effectively than just human-based probes. Ryan Johnson works on looking at phenomena called hybrid dynamical systems, which are systems that he uses, the analogy he uses is bouncing ball, which is basically a bouncing ball will stop and it will rise predictably. And that is has both a continuous component and a discrete time component. There's lots of applications to these systems in things like robotics and aerospace. Ananisi, it was already been briefly discussed by Catherine Mitchell. She worries about pumas and their interaction with humans within the Santa Cruz Mountains. Jordan Kitts in our METOX department worries about, in a slight theme of these awardees, cholera, which of course is a major health problem associated with non-clean water. And he's particularly interested in how cholera works in tandem or not with biofilm formation. It may have different means of generation and protecting itself associated with biofilms. Zhanhui Chang is working on the human genome, and in particular the efforts to produce a pan-genome that is a more representative model of the human genome that can be applied to all sorts of diverse populations. Spencer Everett worries about dark energy in the universe, and in particular has probed the southern sky for looking at how what the large-scale structures of galaxies are, and basically figuring out how much dark energy is. And this is a theme of UC Santa Cruz's impacts in both astronomy and physics through time, is the inventory of dark energy and dark matter in the universe. Lastly, Stephanie Melchor from our science communication program already has a PhD in looking at the immunology associated with the Toxoplasma parasite. And she's worked at both the Stanford Linear Accelerator and the Monterey Herald, and having folks with expertise, very high level expertise within disciplines is so critical for conveying science communication, and Stephanie exemplifies that. Okay, and with that, I will turn the presentation over to, once I find my share screen, I will turn the presentation over to David Coulter from Astronomy and Astrophysics to discuss his research, and following him will be Aviva Lohr from Computational Media. So,
if I may, I just want to acknowledge that we have reached our scheduled end of time for the meeting, but we do not want to shortchange these two wonderful presentations. So I beg your indulgence to stick with us for another 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, hi, thanks. Can you guys all hear me? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start this presentation. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm assuming that you guys can all see this. Is that?
No, not yet.
Sorry.
Not yet.
Okay. Try this again.
There you go.
Okay. Great. Okay, assuming you guys can see this now. Good morning, and I'd like to introduce myself again. My name is Dave Coulter. I'm a fifth-year graduate student in the Department of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and I'd love to take this opportunity to share with you my research on searching for and characterizing the electromagnetic counterparts of gravitational wave sources, and also to give a huge thank you to the ARCS Foundation for their support. So I start with this picture of the night sky, which for thousands of years was the basically standard, the gold standard in astronomical observing. And as technology increased and we gained the ability to look at light that was invisible to our eyes, what remained the same is that we were looking at the universe in light. So light is only one of four fundamental forces. So really, we're only seeing a quarter of the universe. That starts to change with Einstein. Einstein not only revolutionized our understanding of light, but also our understanding of gravity. To Einstein, gravity was a geometrical effect caused by concentrations of matter warping space and time. Now, a consequence of this theory are that gravitational waves should exist. But what are gravitational waves? Well, it turns out if you take some mass and you accelerate it, it will produce ripples, just like water waves that can communicate energy and information, except what's doing the waving in this case is space and time itself. Now, this was a hugely controversial prediction in 1915, and it was 100 years later when they were first identified unambiguously by LIGO. So this is a simulation of two of the black holes that LIGO detected. Each black hole is about 30 times the mass of the entire solar system. So this is a fantastic result, and in 2017, those scientists won the Nobel Prize. But black holes are black for a reason. They're so massive that light can't escape from them. So if you expect two invisible things to merge, you wouldn't necessarily see anything. On the other hand, if you have a neutron star, and a neutron star is the burned out core of a massive star, each neutron star is about the size of a city, but weighs about 1.5 times the mass of the entire solar system. So if these are merging with each other, they should similarly produce gravitational waves, but because they're made of stuff, largely neutrons, they should also produce a luminous transient. And so that's what I study, is the combination of light and gravity. So what can it tell us about the universe? It turns out it can tell us a lot about fundamental features of the universe, ranging from the origin of heavy elements all the way to how dense matter can be. And I want to focus on, for now, the origin of the heavy elements. So for quite some time, we've known that inside stars, those are the birthplaces of the chemical elements for the most part. So we take light elements, we fuse them together to get heavier elements, and that tells the story up until you get to around iron. Now, where it starts to get complicated is how do you produce things like gold, platinum, uranium? Those elements require a lot of free neutrons, and those free neutrons don't exist in the centers of most stars. Now, again, neutron stars are made mostly of neutrons. And so if they emerge, that's a natural source that can produce these neutrons that can seed these nuclei and produce these heavy elements. So in 2017, this unicorn event actually happened. There was a neutron star merger that was detected by LIGO. And I want to stress that this is a unicorn event, right? So this is something that happened about 43 megaparsecs away, which is astronomer speak for about 140 million light years. So this is right next door if you're an extragalactic astronomer like myself. And 140 million years ago, that's in the early Cretaceous, right when flowering plants were just starting to evolve. So that's when these neutron stars merged. And then LIGO detected the blast of gravitational radiation in August of 2017. The next slide I'm going to show shows that actual gravitational waveform that LIGO detected on the bottom, and on the top, you'll see the gamma ray burst waveform, and there will be some sounds associated with this slide. So on the bottom, you can hear that rising crescendo. And then 2 seconds later is the gamma ray burst. And I've been assured that's actually what a gamma ray burst sounds like. So you have to understand how incredibly exciting this was. The false alarm rate was 1 in every 10,000 years. So basically 1 in the length of civilization did we think that LIGO was wrong about the detection. But also this was very close and it was supposed to be luminous. So the entire world community of transient observers started searching for it. I happened to be in Copenhagen with my advisor and I texted him, stop what you're doing and check your email. So this kind of typifies the intensity of the actual search and the discovery. And he didn't believe me. So I had to spend the next several minutes texting back and forth with him, trying to convince him that this was something that we needed to drop everything and search for. And I'm pleased to say that our group was the first group in the world in history to actually image the optical counterpart to a gravitational wave source. And you can see that clearly here because in the data reduction step, there's a helpful red arrow. But in all seriousness, this was an incredible discovery and the race was really intense. And I think the best picture to really visually describe the feeling of making this discovery is a picture of my daughter taken just a short time after. So this is the feeling of discovering an optical transient. But just to put that in perspective again, on the left is a picture from the Hubble Space Telescope. On the right is our discovery image, and you can clearly see there's something there that wasn't there before. So to go back to this question of, how much gold was produced in this neutron star merger, we can answer that question by essentially fitting models to the data. So the brightness of the merger corresponds to the mass of stuff created. And it turns out that there's about a Jupiter mass of gold generated in this merger, which is incredible, just on the face of it, to think that we are both literal and figurative treasure hunters here. But the major scientific result from this aspect of the discovery is to essentially explain where the abundances of heavy elements in the universe come from. And we think they come from at least a major source from neutron star mergers. So this discovery and the localization that we did at Santa Cruz, as well as the binary neutron star merger from LIGO, earned the Breakthrough of the Year award from the Science Journal. So, as a relatively young researcher, it's all downhill from here, I think. But it was an incredible honor to be a part of this, and you can't do it without a team. So I want to highlight our team. And at Santa Cruz, we have this ability to have young researchers do this kind of work and really be pushed out in front by our advisors, which is an incredible honor. And I want to, again, thank you for your time, your attention. Also, massive thank you to the ARCS Foundation for their support. And I'm going to go ahead and relinquish my time.
Yes.
Awesome. That was a great presentation, Dave. Can everyone hear me well?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So hi, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about my research in immersive virtual reality for physical rehabilitation. I'm Aviv, a second-year PhD student in the Computational Media department at UC Santa Cruz. My research really focuses on the intersection of human-computer interaction and immersive media. And I work at the Assist Labs, or the Assistive Socio-Technical Solutions for Individuals with Special Needs via Technology Lab, that's directed by Professor Sri Kurnawan. And really the goal of our research is to help people with special needs maintain a high quality of life through technology. So we work in a variety of areas, but today I'm going to be talking about some of our research into immersive media for healthcare. So before we dive into everything, why immersive virtual reality? As cheesy as this sounds, it all started with a life-changing event that I had at UC Santa Cruz. Oop, sorry. I was competing during nationals in judo, and I did the #1 thing that you should never do in judo. I was about to land on my back, which is called an ippon, or a matched loss, and I posted my right dominant arm. The result, I completely ruptured my tricep ligament. I had to get reconstructive surgery. I went through a year of physical therapy as a full-time student. And I really had this question persist when I recovered. How can we use emerging technologies to assist physical rehabilitation? And so during this presentation today, I'll be talking about 2 games that I've developed and that we're using for research at Assist Labs. And so immersive virtual reality has really been blowing up over the past 5 years. We now have these consumer devices that can simulate almost any environment, say to take you onto the top of a high-rise building and save a cat, or face your fear of heights from the safety of the ground. But for physical therapy, these systems afford a medium to translate our full body movements into the game world. We can now do exercises that control virtual dragons, and these systems are only becoming more accurate in their motion capture capabilities. They're becoming more affordable and more user-friendly as they're being integrated into the market. And so when looking at virtual reality for physical therapy, we started partnering with local disability learning centers back in 2016 around Santa Cruz, California. Our first game really asked the question of what would stroke rehabilitation look like with these immersive virtual reality headsets? Specifically, how can we translate constraint-induced movement therapy, which often involves repetitive motions with the weak side of the body after a stroke, where you're playing with Legos or sorting balls. What if we could translate this therapy into a cosmic galaxy in which your exercises are now based on catching shooting stars, that we incentivize you with a variety of visual, audio stimuli and scoring mechanics? And so this led to the development of Project Starcatcher, which we designed over the course of 2 months with disability learning centers, so involving adults with developmental disabilities, stroke survivors, and focus groups to really design this outer world game. And what we found was these systems can be incredibly effective at automating a lot of the physical therapy success metrics. We can track your range of motion over time, see how you're performing in your repetitive exercises. And comparing it to the traditional constraint-induced movement therapy, we saw a 40% increase in compliance. So these systems, they can be incredibly effective at engaging users to follow through with their therapy, but we wanted to see what synergies could we create when utilizing autonomous systems and wearable robotics. So the next game that I'll be talking about was started off with this exploration of this exosuit that we can see on the right. Basically this wearable system that can help you move and understand your movements when you're in your early stages of physical rehabilitation. Using the same design considerations that we found from Project Starcatcher, we ended up developing this environment in which you're transported into a grassy valley. The world around you reacts to your movements. As you're performing your exercises, you're tasked with protecting this butterfly from inclement weather. The world will grow brighter, the rain will slowly disappear, and you'll see trees growing around you as you're performing. And so this led to Project Butterfly, in which we were able to evaluate the wearable exosuit that we started with, but we even moved on to test the game without the exosuit for a 2-month period of home health. If users were using this to complete their exercise homework from physical therapy, would they remain engaged, and how useful would the system actually be? And so in reality, as you can see in the figure on the top right, we're just mapping exercises using the VR system's inherent motion capture capabilities. We had physical therapists track 7 different exercises and remotely transmit them to their users. And we found that these patients were able to remain engaged over the 2-month period. And so my current research looks into how can we use these the systems and the plethora of data that we can get from these environments to make them a little bit more reactive and personalized. We're looking at biomechanical simulators to get muscle forces, to be able to predict range of motion and joint torques. And we're even testing systems to see how are you emotionally feeling during your exercises? How can we interpret brainwaves and heart rate to help adapt the environment stimuli to help you get through your exercises and so on? And so as an ARCS scholar, really my research has been focused on how can we make physical therapy more emotionally and physically intelligent? How can we create an adaptable online platform for remote physical rehabilitation using these head-mounted displays? And so this past summer, we began exploring this question by interviewing over 130 physical therapists across the United States to really understand what has been going on with their physical therapy practice, especially during the context of the pandemic, because what we're doing right now through Zoom, this is how physical therapy is done. And unfortunately, these 2D displays, this loss of hands-on information, it has heavily impacted clinics around the United States. So driving off of this question, we began developing new tools in immersive virtual reality, extending beyond these 2 games to see how can we help these physical therapists and patients perform their remote care. And so just to give you an example of what this looks like, we have these different games that can help users remain engaged in their home exercise. They can increase compliance. They can increase the sort of remote data analysis that we can use to see how people are performing. We're able to get muscle forces through biomechanical simulation. And so our current research has been exploring how can we apply machine learning and artificial intelligence to create this physical therapy clinic on a headset. Again, using this $300 standalone device, how can we predict your muscle forces, your range of motion, to both help the physical therapists track and prescribe new exercises, but also use those gains to help users get engaged with their exercises in the context of the pandemic. And so I'd like to close by thanking Assist Labs, the many advisors, collaborators, and mentors that I've had the privilege to work on these projects with. And then, of course, a big thank you to the ARCS Foundation for supporting scholars like me. Thank you for listening to this lightning research talk. And I guess I'll pass the mic back to Carol now.
Excuse me. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was a very rich and informative presentation across everybody, but I do realize we have gone long, and my apologies for that. But before we go, I want to invite all of our panelists, scholars included, to turn on your cameras because we want to give you guys a round of applause. You guys are an inspiration to everybody. And thank you, Deans and Erica and Joe and Lisa and Adina. I appreciate all of your help and assistance. We'll conclude for now, but if there are any questions for our scholars or our deans, please send them my way. Everyone have a wonderful day.